Let's bring in Mark Mix. He's the president of the National Right to Work Committee. And we're now fighting another battle in Virginia, which is this egregious collective bargaining debacle they got going on for all state and municipal and local government employees that could bankrupt municipalities like the one that Reeves lives in, because they're going to have to raise property taxes to fund this stuff that is determined by some independent arbiter with that nobody elected. This stuff is nuts. So let's bring in Mark Mix. Mark, by the way, Mark, I'm going to roll this session. We tabled iGaming, yay. We the getting rid of right to work, we stopped that, yay. Skill games is about to go up in flames again, yay. So in order for me to run the table, we need Spanberger to veto this horrible bill. Tell the gang and the audience about why this thing is such a catastrophe. Mark Mix.
Yeah, well, I know Senator Reeves knows, and John Reed knows, and Dan, nice to meet you. But this bargaining bill that passed in the legislature, Scott, let me preface it by saying this. Scott Somerville, the Senate Majority Leader, said he wanted to hand over 500,000 government employees to the Service Employees International Union. And John, this narrative about how we got to give union officials power over negotiating working conditions for government employees in Virginia, whether they be at the city level or the 133 institutions that are now going to be forced to recognize unions and bargain with them over terms and conditions of employment in Virginia. I mean, just 2 days ago in Charlottesville, two supporters of union bargaining back then have now indicated that property taxes are going to go up 3 or 4 or 5 cents per $1,000 to balance the budget to fund the results of the bargaining. I mean, in Richmond, payroll went up. They basically voluntarily agreed to bargain with the unions, a 5 to 38% increase in labor costs in the city of Richmond.
Wow.
I mean, when you look at California, New York, Illinois, New Jersey, Connecticut, the reason why they're on the fiscal precipice is because they have given union officials the power to negotiate over terms and conditions of employment. Now, we didn't agree with Governor Northam back in 2021, Senator. I think it was when you passed a bill to voluntarily say, if you want to, you can. Only 14 counties and cities decided to bargain with unions during that period. But now it's mandatory. And as John, you mentioned, this includes a binding arbitration provision. It includes home health care providers, which is another 150,000 workers that will be under union control. I mean, we've got a plan to stop that. We litigated a case all the way through the U.S. Supreme Court and won it on behalf of healthcare providers in Illinois, and basically said these people aren't subject to unionization under state law in that state. So we've got some litigation to do, but this is a very serious thing. And I think it's a turning point for Virginia, whether or not, John Reed, you talked about what happens for the next decade or the next, these dark years that come. I mean, if municipalities down in Southwest Virginia have got to negotiate over union contracts, you think about what that does to city budgets and county budgets, and then apply that on a New York, California scale. Boy, there's some real damage that can be done to the Commonwealth.
Reeves, what do you make of this, Senator? You're right in the middle. You're right in the middle of it.
He is point on, and we've looked at those numbers in the budget. That's why we don't have a balanced budget right now. And I will say this, and maybe I'm wrong, and I hope I'm wrong. California doesn't balance their budget. And so far, our Democrats have shown that they're willing to violate the Constitution, at least with this, fake gerrymandering election stuff. I would not put it past. I don't think Louise Lucas would do it, but I think the House might do it. I know the chairman of appropriations in the House, Luke Torian, and I think both those two, he and Lucas, will probably hold to the Constitution, but I see a time moving forward, if those two aren't there and they bring in one of these young, kind of radicalized members in the House to run the budget there, I see a point where we start really, truly not even following our own Constitution. And I do worry about national right to work. They've put in so many bills. They haven't, Spanberger said she wouldn't sign a bill to get rid of right to work, but they put in enough legislation that they've taken the guts out of our right to work. And, this is just one of many. You have the Family Leave Act. That's going to gut businesses. And, I don't know how we pay for all of this stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, we've eaten up Youngkin's $2.7 billion surplus and then some. So
People should be mad about that. I mean, is everybody aware of what's happened? In less than 3 months, Glenn Youngkin sets us up with extra money, and the Democrats burn through it, just like what those jerks did in Maryland when Wes Moore arrived. They took a really good financial situation and ruined it. And Bryce, I got to tell you, I posted this morning at 6 o'clock in the morning. No one's paying attention. The federal government just crossed to $39 trillion in debt. And it's kind of the 10th story of the day. Oh, wow, we're $39 trillion in debt. Everybody in this country should be alarmed that we are so deeply in debt. Eventually, and I think you heard me say this on the campaign trail, the Virginia budget is balanced, predicated on federal money covering a bunch of these bills. When the federal government says, oh, holy cow, there's no money left, or something happens like another COVID. I'm surprised COVID didn't tank us, but something happens and that money is not available. Everybody's going to go, wait a minute, you mean the pipeline is not full? And we're all going to suffer for it because no one wants to be responsible now. And obligating us to all these labor unions and forcing taxes up, I mean, there's just no positive end result of this. Look at the governor of New York is telling people,
John, the municipalities have to balance their budget, right? There's no way around it. So if you're a municipality and you're a supervisor, you're in the board of supervisors in a county, and you get one of these unfunded mandates that Mark Mix is talking about, and it's a pot of money you don't have, well, you can't raise income taxes. You don't have the power to do that. The only power the community has to raise taxes is property taxes. That's it. So they got to balance the budget. They got an unfunded mandate by some arbiter that nobody voted for. He overrides all the supervisors or the council members, overrides them, and then you got to raise property taxes to pay for it, Mark. I mean, that's what people don't understand. That's why if Spenberger wants affordability, she has got to veto this bill, Mark.
Well, right, John. But let's clarify what this means, because Senator Reeves, John Frederick, I know you and Governor candidate, Lieutenant Governor candidate Reed, you're not against unions, and that's the point here. I mean, the idea that teachers join together and firefighters join together and police officers join together to amplify their voice through a collective union, that is just that, an amplification of a voice. But then saying, while we allow them to redress their grievances with government, to say, oh no, that's not enough. We're going to put them in between elected officials and the taxpayers in their municipalities. So now this mandate saying we must, John Reed, to your point, we must listen to them, we must negotiate with them, and we must negotiate to a contract. If we don't, we get to impasse. We're now going to bring in a third party and say, no, this is how you're going to run the government. This is how you're going to fund it. And you have no choice, no alternative. I mentioned to John Frederick before in Iowa, this is exactly what happened to Governor Terry Branstad. Their unions out there negotiated a contract that said that they had to get this raise. Branstad, so I will not sign that bill. I will not raise taxes. An arbitrator flew in and said, sorry, the law says you must. And they had to raise taxes on people in Iowa. And, it's to this point, the states that have this, like Wisconsin and Scott Walker, they were the first state to recognize bargaining for government employees in their state. And they have led in reforming that because of the fiscal mess it created. They estimate in Wisconsin, since Scott got through the reform of the bargaining law there, the taxpayers have saved over $30 billion. I think that's real money. Although John Reed, 39 trillion is a little bigger than that. But yeah. Anyway, it's real money.
Yeah, this is not what democracy looks like when a third-party arbiter is telling the elected officials you're gonna have to raise taxes, and we should fight like hell to make sure it doesn't happen in Virginia and put the pressure on Abigail and team.
Hey, Senator, I have a question for you. And John Frederick has been helping, and we shut the governor's office phone bank down for 3 days prior to the end of the session. They turned off their phones and turned off their fax machines and their email machines because Virginians were standing up once they were notified about what this is about. And obviously, they have bargaining. They have voluntary bargaining right now in municipalities that want to do it, that think they could do it, think they should do it. But now it becomes mandatory, and that's where the difference is made. And frankly, it's going to have a dramatic impact on Virginia, not only the politics, but the fiscal solvency of the Commonwealth.
Senator Reeves, what's the odds that Abigail Spanberger sees the folly of this, sees how it's going to raise taxes, goes against her message of affordability, and vetoes this bill?
From your mouth to God's ears, John. That's about the only hope we have.
But we got to keep the pressure on, John. We've got to call. I mean, 804-786-2211 is a good phone call to make right now and say veto this bill. 804-786-2211. And if the phones are still working, somebody there will have to listen about this dramatic change in the Commonwealth. You know, and Senator Reeves, this is interesting probably. When there was a bill to prohibit bargaining in the Commonwealth, we had a Supreme Court decision, we had an Arlington case. But in 1993, guess who signed a bill to prohibit bargaining in the Commonwealth of Virginia? Not outlaw unions, but prohibit bargaining in the implementation of unions getting in between citizens and taxpayers. Rhetorical question, that would be Doug Wilder.
Yeah.
Doug Wilder signed that bill. He understood it. He knew what it meant, and frankly said the Commonwealth, we'll talk to anybody about how government should be run. We'll listen to anybody with the suggestions about how government should run, but we're not going to commit ourselves to be mandated to impose the results of those negotiations.
Well, Doug Wilder was a different type of Democrat, and I was
his party left him.
Yeah, I was just with the Governor Wilder last week at a big event, and we were talking in the green room before we went on stage. And I don't want to say I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I think he is looking to see whether Abigail Spanberger, who doesn't have a clue what's going on, is surrounding herself with practical folks who understand Virginia government and the budget of Virginia down to the locality, or whether she's going to surround herself with social justice warriors who don't get it, have never balanced their own checkbook, and are going to push through stuff that's going to bankrupt us. And he inherited a bad situation. Finally, you listen to him talk about the day he was inaugurated. They took him into the office and said, now we got a big problem we haven't talked to you about. We're in grave trouble financially. And he said his joy of being inaugurated governor lasted a couple of hours, because then he realized, oh my God, I'm going to have to be the bad guy to cut a bunch of stuff. And I just don't see, at least in the Democrat Party, responsible leaders who can objectively look at the data and make smart decisions. Instead, it's always driven by this crazy social justice warrior garbage that ruins societies and bankrupts them.
Well, Senator, that's my question. You work with these people every day. Are your Democratic colleagues really just this economically illiterate, or is there something more nefarious going on?
Well, the good news is I think both professional staff in the money committees understand their roles and try to tailor back a little bit on some of these things. I know Louise Lucas leans heavily on April, who runs our Senate Finance Committee, the staff, and does all the numbers for us. And so, ultimately they're not one party or the other, but they understand their role is to balance the budget and do everything we can to maintain our AAA bond rating. But at the end of the day, they salute the flag and follow orders. But they do a very good job. Both sides of the aisle just applaud them when they come on and all the hard work they do to create a budget. And they give a lot of wise counsel. But again, end of the day, they're going to do what the chairman says they've got to do. I think a lot of them are afraid of their own shadows of getting primaried from the left. Look, Chap's supposed to be on here today, and he can tell you, I just saw George Barker, our other moderate Democrat who got defeated when Chap did the other day, and he agreed with me. So, I do have a question about the right to work. I'd love to know what Wisconsin, I have a friend of mine that's the majority leader in Wisconsin on the floor, but I'd like to really get into the weeds on now, before we have the final budget fix done, what Wisconsin did to kind of counter this overwave that we're going through right now. I'd love to get some information on that.
Yeah, Senator. What they did, basically, they had soup to nuts bargaining, which is now what Virginia is considering. It had everything in there. You know, you got to negotiate over everything. What
Right.
Scott Walker did is he said he didn't get rid of the bargaining that occurring and still occurs in Wisconsin. He said we're gonna bargain over wages only. That's it.
Okay.
We recommended that he repeal the whole thing because once you keep a platform in place, it tends to build. The barnacles build up, and the ship gets
Right.
slower and slower and more fiction. So that was what it was. They took away everything else. And one of the big deals was the health insurance that was being negotiated because the union, the Wisconsin Education Association, owned the health insurance subsidiary that was negotiating over the premiums. It was really crazy stuff. And this was a result of bargaining from 1959 till 2011 when Walker said, we can't continue. It's kind of like John Reed said that when the governor got got inaugurated and went to the governor's office and said, hey, we got a big problem. Wisconsin had that same problem when Walker was there. And, he did this. It was a fight. It was an amazing fight, literally marches on the Capitol, damage to the Capitol, the whole thing, because this is ultimately the power of organized labor. The private sector, we're down to 5.9% unionization density in the private sector. In the public sector, it's 32%. And as all of you know, the public sector is the one place where you can go, you can squeeze the golden goose's neck, and the golden goose will still lay eggs, unfortunately, that you can spend and eat and do all that. And government is kind of that ever-fulfilling oil jar, if you will, to Elijah's metaphor, that keeps filling up every morning. And so basically what they did is they limited it all the way down to just bargaining over wages. And then there was a cost of living filter in there that had an impact. But they took away everything else. And all of that stuff now, Senator, is in the Virginia bill. All the stuff that was in the Wisconsin bill that ended up causing this fiscal crisis that had to be solved, frankly. You couldn't go on. And if you look at Illinois and Chicago, the Chicago Teachers Union, I mean, they literally were going to borrow more money, even though they're in debt, to fund the union contract. And if anyone thinks the Chicago school system is providing, Rhodes Scholars, they probably are providing some, but not generally. Mm-hmm. And that school district's results are really bad. And the only thing that's happened there is the increased spending because of the demands of organized labor, specifically the teachers union in Chicago. I mean, the stories here are just, unless you're blind and deaf, you have to understand what this means, is that you're negotiating, a private entity is now negotiating how we're going to run government. That's where we're at in Virginia if Spanberger signs the bill.
Well, what I'm trying to avoid, and we have time to do it, and if you don't mind sending me what you have is some data points for some reasonable people in her secretariat to look at, to read, to show what transpired in Wisconsin. Maybe she'll amend the bill with wages only and cost of living because she's going to sign a bill. She will sign a bill, but if we can get those changes in, maybe we can avoid going over the cliff and having to fix it 10 years from now or 15 years from now. I think if you can get me that to Senator Reeves at senate.virginia.gov, I'll get it up to somebody in the staff that I know that I trust who will look at this thing reasonably. So I don't know any other hope, and I don't know if you guys have contacted the governor's office to tell her this, but she's probably looking for a way to solve it. And I don't think they have the people up there that have the wherewithal to solve the issue.
Yeah. Well, I got to tell you, Senator, we've contacted the governor's office on multiple occasions, and we've provided plenty of information. I mean, even the Washington Post ran an editorial, an op-ed about the problems with bargaining. The Richmond Times-Dispatch was involved. Media across the Commonwealth were involved. And so it's not for lack of information. Going back to what John Reed said, this is about politics and power. And ultimately, when Scott Soroville says, I want to deliver 500,000 government employees to the SEIU, that can't be good.
Right. Well, the governor of Virginia serves one term, which I think is probably a good idea, except for situations like this, because they don't have to answer on the back end to some of the bad decisions they may make. And I'm not a Louise Lucas fan, but at least I'll say that somebody like Louise Lucas, who's been in the state Senate for many, many, many years and has seen many, many governors, I would hope, not knowing her personally, I would hope that she would recognize, holy cow, I'm still going to be around probably having to deal with the fallout from bad decisions. And that might influence where she goes with all of this.
I thought
Yeah.
Ben Tribbett was running the Virginia government now.
You've heard about this, haven't you?
Yeah.
This huge defamation lawsuit, $17 million defamation. I don't know the whole
What
all
is
the
this?
details, but
What?
it's nasty.
What? What is it? What defamation?
You haven't seen this?
No.
It's gotten a little bit of coverage, but of course not as much coverage as it should. And Mark, forgive me for detouring here for a second, and then Dan and I got to go do my show. But the chief of staff, as I understand it, and I don't want to get sued, but as I understand it, the chief of staff to Governor Spanberger has been accused of something really tawdry and not nice by
Louise Lucas's finance
guy,
chair.
and that person has now decided to sue him for $17.5 million over defamation, alleged defamation, and everybody's talking about the Capitol.
Was
Big
that
mess.
Ben? Was
Big
that Ben Tribbett?
Yeah.
So Ben Tribbett is being sued or is suing?
He's being sued. If the reporting is correct, I haven't
Allegedly.
personally
Allegedly. So allegedly he's being sued. What is Ben being? What is Ben being
he
sued
said
for?
something about this woman who is the chief of staff to the governor that was not nice, and she is pushing back. I kind of admire that. Like, she's not going to roll over. Apparently, it's turning into a mess, and it's what everybody's talking about at the Capitol. Except they don't want to talk about it because they don't want to get sued, and it's so nasty. It's kind of the behind the scenes thing.
Dan, how good?
Well-
Can you send me the link on that? Because I'm really good friends with Ben. I haven't talked to him. The last time I saw him was at the MGM casino. We were gambling
Call
together.
him and ask.
wow, okay.
See if he'll tell you what's going on.
Yeah, I'll call him and ask him.
I
But if you
think
have a
I'm
link,
reporting it correctly. I
if
think.
you have a link, Dan, send that to me, will you?
Yeah, I'll get that to you.
Thank you.
Okay.
All
Well,
right,
guys, we got to
listen,
run. I'm so glad to see
I know we
you.
got to roll.
Always
Mark
happy
makes
to see you.
Mark makes final word. Call Abigail Spanberger, 804-786-2211, 804-786-2211. Call Abigail Spanberger. Tell her to veto this bill. It's horrible because it's going to raise your property taxes. I mean, it's just as simple as it knows on your face, and you're good to go. Mark Mix also got it's got a op-ed coming out in my newsletter today. He's also going to be in the Virginia Star. Go to virginiastar.com. And on Trump Nation News, Mark Mix got a big op-ed coming out on it. Mark, thanks for being with us today, and thanks to the Virginia gang.
Yeah. Thanks for letting me join this group here, this important group.
It's
It was
pretty
fun
good,
to be
right?
with you. Thanks. All right. Thanks, John.
Thank you, Mark.